Welcome to Yurt Time. I'm your host, Kurt. I'm not currently in a yurt, but I do mostly exist in a yurt. I've gotten up and gone out of the yurt. So I'm different from the yurt somehow because I can leave it. Even though my name is Kurt, and it's my Kurt yurt. I'm Yurt Kurt, and I live in a Kurt yurt. So today's episode is on prayer, and there's different levels and different types of prayer. But if you were going to define prayer, the definition would be the means by which anything is accomplished. So it's a type of focus, and so there's cruder, more subtle forms, or there's cruder, more gross, materialistic forms of prayer. I always like to use athletics as an example, or physical fitness. And so there's a particular mentality and a direction of the attention, a control and a direction of the focus on some aspect of the body, and you are some aspect of existence. And when you put your mind on that aspect of existence, combined with like suffering and personal sacrifice, then you can get that part to change, or you can get a skill to develop, right? Like if you want a skill to develop, you go to practice and you have a particular mentality, a particular mindset, a particular like isolation of the focus and isolation of the attention. It's a loneliness. You can't be thinking about anything else. And so you can do that with athletics, but then you can also do that thinking about other people, thinking about nature. You could be thinking about your relationship with God. That's what a lot of people go, oh, what's the ultimate thing I can do with my time? And when they're younger, it's like, you play with your toys and you imagine things and you learn sports or learn objects, and it's like, what's the most important thing? So people start to settle in on using their prayer to connect to the transcendent, usually out of a fear of death. Right? You start to get old and die, and then suddenly it becomes more and more obvious that you need to connect to the eternal and the transcendent. Not necessarily like, oh, because you're afraid of death, just as like it's a physiological response, like the way that a tree prepares for winter versus summer. It's a redirection of resources and attention towards something that is eternal and can be reborn, right? So that happens in biological cycles, and it also happens in the cycle of human psychology. So prayer is similar to, or even another gross example is like sexuality or reproductive success. There's a type of attention and focus that you put on a relationship or sexuality and it makes it successful. Like, how do you successfully reproduce? How do you successfully raise a child? And so engaging in practices and activities that help successfully raise a child is prayerful sex. Like the entire rearing of the child is sex. Just, it's like, what is the like if you were gonna go running, like which exercise do you do to train for running? Is running. It's the overall, it's the race, it's the metric by which you would measure like the gym time or the practice time or the training time. And so all of these things that's prayer. Prayer is that focus flow states by which you get results. And if you're not getting results in an activity, it's because you're not doing it prayerfully, which is often meaning like because you're it's like always a distraction, right? It's like, why do people plateau in whatever activity, be it sports, music, art, prayer, self-improvement? It's like the focus starts to be on something or someone else. Like even with self-improvement, right? It's like the focus needs to be on the self, but after you start focusing on the self enough, you'll get distracted by the notion or the idea that like, oh, since you're better, you can improve you can improve other people. And then at the point at which you start trying to improve other people with your self-improvement, you've gotten distracted from self-improvement and you no longer improve as a self. Like, that prayer has been lost. And then that prayer is what makes life good in general. Anytime you're praying, life is good. So like if you're praying to a sport or an art or money or anything, as long as you're praying, life is good. So even you can use those things as a means to pray. You can use sports as a means to pray, as a means of focusing the attention on a transcendent value and like connecting heaven and earth, basically, as they call it. Like you're connecting your vision or your goal to earth via your practice, via your prayer, and the prayer is that connection. And so that's when the plan, like if you're in sports or bodybuilding, the plan, the activity, the mental focus, the effort, the timing of location, the movement of the body, the movement of the mind, all of that combines together, and you get a better body or you get increased athletic skill. And so anytime you're doing that, anytime heaven and earth is being bridged, that is happiness, or that is joy, or that is the cessation of suffering. And so people can use activities to do that. And when they do, it works, but then like you often become so good at the activity that you don't have to pray to get it anymore. It's like become so pervasive, like you've gotten so wealthy, or you're so good at something, or you've gotten so famous that it's like it continues on and it doesn't require any prayer whatsoever. And at that point, like the thing that you were doing by which you thought the success was making you happy, but it was the prayer. And so then you can end up being very successful, but losing the prayer because you were praying for success. So once the success comes, the prayer is lost. And then the suffering starts because heaven and earth is disjointed. So then people end up being in a ton of suffering because they go from activity to activity to activity, looking for the lost prayer that they used to have from whatever activity. And then blaming the one activity on not being eternal enough, like, oh, that religion was wrong, or that activity was shallow, or whatever, because I lost prayer. And then going and looking for some other activity, which sometimes can reignite the prayer, but then again, it's impossible. The same pattern results from itself as long as there's not an understanding of the people are designed for prayer like an animal, so you can. Like the situation of the world will cause you to naturally pray, but you can still be an unconscious animal rather than a conscious animal and not know that you're praying. So that this pattern or this thing can be elusive or difficult to understand, like how an animal or a lower life form can't understand. So people yeah, I mean, people are designed to pray. You're designed to improve at stuff. You're designed to bridge heaven and earth. You're designed to collect the matter of the metabolism and combine it with like the goal. Even if it's like shooting arrows or something like that in a contest or archery, you've taken all of the oxygen and the carbon and the nitrogen and the matter of the ground, and then drawn it together and then given it the higher heavenly meaning of like shooting an arrow, right? And when that stops, when the arrow doesn't go to target, when the metabolism is not drawn into an activity, and if it misses, then people would call that sinning in archery. So that's like what prayer is. It doesn't really matter the posture or anything else. It's just that it's that background thing of when you're doing it. It's kind of the most natural thing in the world. There are ways to like learn it, but as far as I can tell, the people that are best at stuff do it like reflexively without too much intellectual understanding. But once something breaks or whatever, then you want to apply intellectual understanding to the situation and be able to set the bone or set the injury correctly. You don't want to have an injury and then compensate for it with thoughts and try and do it with like a workaround, but the intelligence applied to the break as kind of like a medicine. It's kind of the appropriate use of the mind. It's just to put things in place, and then the prayer, like when a bone mends, it's because of the same thing's happening as when you pray. When a bone mends, it's the same thing that's happening as when you throw a ball and you hit the target that you want it to hit. It's the same thing, the same way that all the currents and the waves in the ocean are the same thing. It's all the movement of water. So it's all the movement of unification of heaven and earth. Like when a bone knits, because it's like the metabolism is being formed into the pattern of the body again. Like the leg's broken, and then there's an organizing force that goes and stitches it back together if there's an injury. So it's like the mind can kind of see what, like, the mind has to put things in the right place, and then it prays together. And if the mind gets in the way the mind can't pray things together. It's like if you tried to like tie the bone together yourself, that would suck. Like the more that you let the prayer and the body heal itself, the less deformed the solution is going to be. And the more that you kind of impose or force the solution onto things, then the more like horrifying and mechanical it kind of becomes. And so there's an easy medium to it, to where it's like, yeah, maybe use the technology of a cast. Like, you broke a bone, okay, we're just gonna put iron caps on the end of each bone since it's broken, and then drill them together or bolt them together. Like that would be a dumb fix, but that happens all the time with all the different technologies. They get in the way of the situation ever healing itself again. But without the technology of saying like, oh, I know the arm is supposed to go there, like if the mind's not saying like, oh, it's like, oh, this is how it goes, then there's no chance for the bone to stitch back together in prayer. And then if you pray over the thing, it will, like, that adds oomph to the healing process. But it's the same thing with addiction and life stuff, is like everything has to be put in the right place, then you pray. But praying without putting everything in the right place doesn't heal anything together correctly. It's just like mending the body. And then that's the overview on praying.